the Faithful Hound. Centuries ago, when knights were strong and brave, there lived a man named Llewellyn the Great. Llewellyn was benevolent to all who met him and was a doting father to his son. His son wasn't the only priority, though. The brave knight adored hunting and was often to be found running his famous hunting dogs in the vales and valleys of Wales. Above all, Llewellyn favoured one particular dog, Gelert. For many years, Gelert hunted at his master's side and was often entrusted with some of the most important jobs around the house. It was said, when Gelert wandered the grounds, he carried himself proudly, with his head held high and his fur glossy and groomed. That was until one fateful day in the middle of an unusually cold winter. Bitter winds and biting frosts had ravaged the land for many months, and food was growing scarce. Llewellyn the Great decided that he would lead a hunt out into the forest in the vain hope of bringing back some meat for his young family. Normally, it would have been inconceivable to head out in such weather, but desperation leads men to do desperate things, and Llewellyn was no exception. Fearing for his family's safety whilst he was out, the knight left his trusty companion to guard their only heir. For many hours the pack traipsed through knee-deep snow. The going was tough, and the horses complained the entire time. But Llewellyn drove them on. He knew that without food his family couldn't survive much longer. It wasn't until the weak midwinter sun reached the zenith of its arc that they finally spied a young buck frozen behind a shield of auburn foliage. Fighting his hunger, Llewellyn peered through the mists that formed with every shallow breath. It took all of his strength to draw back the heavy yew bow and nock an arrow. He paused. He held his breath and said a silent prayer. For a split second it seemed as though the deer would notice them and bolt. But it was frozen in place. Slap! The sound of the bowstring hitting the wood echoed through the silent forest, and only the dull thud of the arrow hitting the animal's hide drowned it out. The entire party let out a sigh of relief, and Llewellyn made sure to say a prayer of thanks for the fallen beast. The mood on the journey back to the house was jubilant and seemed to pass in no time. Even the snow seemed less bothersome, and some of the more youthful hunters even took to throwing snowballs at each other. It seemed like nothing could sour the mood, and yet when they approached the vast front door of Llewellyn's stately house, the visage that met them did just that. There, on the steps, was Gelert, the Faithful Hound. His teeth were bared, his snout dripped with fresh red blood. A sense of dread swept over Llewellyn, and he felt his veins fill with ice. In haste, he raced into the house and straight to his young son's bedroom. Though his crib was empty, the floor and walls were smeared with blood. There was no question in the brave knight's mind what had happened here. Without stopping to consider the situation, Llewellyn strode back down to the front porch and approached his most trusted companion. With tears streaming down his cheeks, he drew his sword and plunged it into the dog. Despite his overwhelming grief, he fell to his knees and hugged the hound tightly while while whispering sobbed apologies to both the day's victims. From the edge of the woods that bordered the house, one of the huntsmen cried out that he had found the missing boy. Scrambling through the snow, Llewellyn raced to the trees and let out a heart-wrenching cry at what he saw. There, in front of him, was his son, unharmed but for a few scratches. Next to him was a very dead, large wolf, the likes of which had been killing sheep in the fields throughout the winter. As it dawned on Llewellyn what had happened, moreover what he had done to Gelert, who had remained faithful to the end, all happiness drained from his life. It is said that from that day forward, he never smiled again.